Okay, now that we said governing and governance and governmentalization are a integral part of defining and managing risk and hence heading towards sustainability, then you need to say something about how do you approach governing and governmentalization. Remembering again that I'm going to be brief, please read the book if you want to follow up. This chapter is not only about governing risk but examines how a complex sustainability challenge becomes an issue that requires governing on the societal level in the first place. I refer to this as becoming governmentalized. Although the Oxford English Dictionary defines governmentalization as the process of bringing something under the control of or supervision of a government, it is used here in relation to the more distributed notion of governing as we saw before here. The concept of governmentalization is central in Foucault's original work on governmentality. He uses it to describe an escalation in the capacity for governing in advanced liberal democracies, which is less about the state taking over society or étatisation. That's the state. État is state in French. Étatisation has to be making of a state. So, and more this is more about introducing regimes of practices that shape the conduct amongst and between various actors, as we'll read next. Governmentalization is therefore understood as a particular process of institutionalization that turns an issue into something governable on a societal level. This is slightly different than the Ostrom approach that I keep mentioning, which is in the previous section on this channel, in this sustainability section, where you look at case studies of a group of farmers managing an irrigation system or a pasturing area, or such small institutions being run. And then in that book at the end we discuss about the scale issues associated with global climate change management and adaptation and mitigation, even though adaptation is very much a local issue. So here we are talking about governing and governmentalization in a broader context, and scale is still an issue in terms of how we are negotiating the global climate agreements, but also it is less so. It's not about just managing specific common goods, because all the focus on Ostrom's work is on commons, sustaining the commons, avoiding the tragedy of the commons, and creating institutions for triumph of the commons. Okay, so slightly different, but ideas are the same. So focusing explicit attention on the institutionalization of regimes of practices of governing risk motivates a careful combination of governmentality and new institutionalism. Governmentality has proven to be a helpful heuristic for grasping the complexities of governing risk in relation to sustainability. It emphasizes the underlying rationalities behind why something becomes institutionalized, but is less well suited to describe the mechanisms of institutionalization. So something is institutionalized by practice doesn't mean it has a mechanism of institutionalization. Okay, just leave it a little bit too theoretical. On the other hand, new institutionalism focuses explicitly on understanding these mechanisms, but has been criticized for not analyzing why something becomes institutionalized. In short, governmentality perspectives mainly address how issues are constructed as governable, whilst new institutionalism examines how governing is institutionalized. You understand? Defining things, doing analysis to come up with governable entities or projects or resources, common goods, sustainability, and so on. But new institutionalism is more about how governing is institutionalized independent of what is governable and so on. Okay, so reading Foucault's Governmentalization and the State, Foucault suggested that at the center of the construction of modern state was not the bureaucracy or army as others had suggested. Instead, he argued that what is really important for our modernity, that is for our present, is not so much étatisation of society. In French, the accent TAT is pronounced état, that's state. So étatisation has to be that. So of society, governmentalization of the society as governmentalization of the state. This governmentalization meant that state was simultaneously brought in and set aside to render governing more effective. Paradoxically, by drawing limits on the state and defining its relationship to society, the state's capacity to govern is increased through the new form of power relations that emerge and can penetrate wider and deeper than ever before. This is the essence of governmentality, and the modern state emerged by negotiating the limits between public and private, state and civil society, legislation and laissez-faire, where everybody is free to do what they want. So not by limiting, boosting or banishing one side or the other. Foucault goes on to argue that although the problems and practices of governing have become the only real space of political struggle and contestation, the governmentalization of the state has nevertheless made it into what it is today and allowed the state to survive. So just to conclude this part, in addition to the explicit focus on agency, also highlights the importance of interest and power. Right, so agency is something we're going to look at here. We talked about it before. It's in general referred to as the willingness and the ability to act. So if you are a voter or some other citizen that has got a duty, you have the willingness and the ability to act, then you are allowed to act and you have agency, right? Institutionalization is a profoundly political process that reflects the relative power of actors mobilizing around organized interests. However, the intrinsic link between actions and institutions, agency and structure, introduces significant path dependency into institutionalization. It means that exercised agency and power in the past restrict and enable present agency and power. So there is a continuum from the past to the present. This happens through symbolic, so regulative, normative and cultural, cognitive, relational and artifactual means, as we see here, spiraling path dependence of actions and institutions between agency and structure. So you go in this direction, structure increases and agency increases, and you narrow into this tunnel of spiraling dependence. So action at T1, institutions at T1, T2, T2 and then T3, and so you create these loops of dependency where agency keeps growing and structure keeps growing, and that's how you would approach governing and governmentalization. Okay, so we'll come back and look at governing complex sustainability challenges, which is the main focus of this book, and this is what leads us to representing or thinking about how to represent human environment systems so that we can define sustainability challenges and the risks, and then proceed to changing the world in the next section, where we actually say how we actually stay on the path to sustainability. I keep saying this path because I don't think of it as something that you accomplish and rest. It's a constant process towards sustainability, where you will always have detours along the way. It's like a wicked problem that we also mentioned, where the problems are not just one solution. These are resolved and you keep resolving again and again as you go forward. Okay, so let's come back and do that. My camera is somehow not so well set that my hand keeps, because I'm waving the left hand and not the right. Anyway, see you in the next podcast.